That morning I left my townhouse later than usual. I skipped breakfast, barely ran a brush through my hair, and forgot the weathered umbrella I normally kept by the door. None of it seemed important. When I finally stepped outside, I drew in a deep breath and paused. The air carried the sharp bite of early spring, and for the first time in weeks, the sun broke through the endless gray that had draped itself over Norfolk like a heavy blanket. It was the kind of sunlight that didn't scorch. It wrapped softly around me, promising that maybe, just maybe, today would hold something good. I quickened my pace, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, eyes on the clock. 2 minutes to spare before my shift at the base infirmary. Fortunately, it was only a short walk, tucked just beyond the row of offices and supply depots. As I moved down the sidewalk, I noticed tiny buds pushing through the skeletal branches that had stood bare all winter. Birds darted between the wires overhead. Even strangers seemed lighter, trading nods as they passed. For a fleeting second, it felt like the world itself was breathing easier. "You're an early major. And glowing too." My colleague, Captain Rodriguez, grinned as I entered the infirmary doors. "Let's see how long that glow survives once the day kicks off," I quipped, tugging on my coat and heading straight for the triage desk. The morning rush was always predictable. Retired veterans lining up for prescriptions, checkups, and endless questions about side effects. I didn't mind the routine. There was comfort in the rhythm, in knowing each interaction mattered. Then my phone rang. I excused myself and answered, expecting it might be my commanding officer. Instead, a man's steady voice came through. "Is this Major Alexandra Hayes?" "Yes," I said quickly, my chest tightening. "Who is this?" "This is Commander Brian Lewis. I'm calling about General Robert Hayes." The warmth drained from my face. "What happened to him?" "There was an incident during an inspection at the training grounds. Your father was injured. He's being taken into surgery at Norfolk General." My grip on the phone faltered. I could barely force the words out. Is he alive?" "Yes, but you need to get here immediately." I didn't even manage a proper goodbye. I turned toward Captain Rodriguez, my hands shaking. "It's my father. Something happened. I need to go." He didn't ask questions, just nodded firmly. "Go. We'll handle things here." And in that instant, the fragile sunshine outside seemed to vanish. The drive to Norfolk General was a blur. Traffic lights changed, streets flew by, but all I could hear were those words. "He's been injured. He's in surgery." My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. My father wasn't some careless recruit. He was a decorated general, a man who spent his time reviewing operations, briefing units, advising strategy. What on earth was he doing in harm's way? None of it added up. By the time I barreled through the automatic doors of the emergency wing, my lungs were burning. I reached the reception desk, barely able to keep my voice steady. "General Robert Hayes. He was just brought in." The nurse glanced at her monitor and nodded. "He's in surgery now. The trauma team took him back about half an hour ago." Surgery. The word alone nearly took my legs out from under me. I collapsed into the nearest chair, feeling like the floor had dropped away. My ears buzzed, my pulse hammered so loud I could hardly catch the rest of what the nurse was saying. Something about consent forms waiting on the next floor. I nodded, scrawled my name where she pointed, and followed like a ghost. Then came the silence. That awful hospital silence where every clock tick sounds like artillery fire, where the hum of the vending machine grows unbearable. I sat alone in a beige waiting room, surrounded by plastic chairs, staring down hallways that seemed to stretch forever. Every few minutes I checked my phone as if it would bring answers. Every 10 I paced, hoping to glimpse someone in scrubs. 2 hours bled into 3. Finally, a surgeon appeared, his cap crooked, his shoulders sagging, eyes bloodshot behind his glasses. "Major Hayes." I shot to my feet so fast the chair skidded back. "Yes, I'm here." "My father, did he?" "He made it through the operation," the doctor said, his voice even but worn thin. "General Hayes suffered a severe spinal injury. A section of reinforced structure collapsed and struck his lower back." "Will he recover?" I asked, my throat raw. "Will he walk?" The doctor paused. That pause told me the truth before his words did. "We stabilized him. We relieved the swelling. Everything went as well as we could have hoped. But right now, it's too soon to predict long-term mobility. Paralysis is a real possibility." The words hung in the air like smoke. My mouth opened but nothing came out. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stood frozen, staring at him as if waiting for him to take it back. He didn't. He's resting now, the surgeon added gently. We'll know more when he wakes. He gave a small, practiced smile before walking away. That was when the dam finally broke. I sank back down, buried my face in my hands and let the tears pour hot and heavy. The sunny morning from just hours before felt like it belonged to another lifetime. They let me see him the next morning. I hadn't slept a minute, curled miserably in one of those stiff waiting room chairs, neck aching, mind caught in an endless loop of worst-case scenarios. But when the nurse appeared and said he was awake in recovery, I rose immediately, heart in my throat. His room was sterile, white, and unnervingly quiet except for the steady rhythm of monitors. He looked pale, older somehow, as if the accident had stolen something more than blood from him. His eyes fluttered open the moment I stepped inside. "Anna," he rasped, his voice weak but steady enough to gut me. "I'm here," I whispered, rushing to his side. I clasped his cold, heavy hand and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "How are you feeling?" I asked, though the answer already loomed in my chest. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked down at the blanket covering his legs, then back at me with a shadow in his eyes. Fear, shame, maybe both. His lips parted. "I can't feel them," he said finally. "My legs. I can't feel anything below the waist." The words hit like a hammer. My breath caught, my throat burning. I forced myself to stay composed. "It could be the anesthesia," I said, stroking his hand with my thumb. "The doctors told me it's too early to know. These things take time." His eyes drifted toward the doorway. I asked the nurse. She wouldn't say much. Just kept telling me the doctor would explain later. "But I know, Anna. Something's wrong. Really wrong." I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Not now. I leaned closer, pressed my forehead to his, and whispered what he needed to hear, even if I wasn't sure I believed it yet. "We'll get through this. Together. You're not alone, Dad. I'll do whatever it takes to help you walk again. I promise." His eyes closed, the faintest nod barely visible. I slipped quietly into the hallway to make the calls. The first was to my daughter Claire. She was still away at university, nearly 100 miles from home. I tried to keep my voice steady, not wanting to frighten her, but she deserved the truth. She wept softly through the receiver, then immediately offered to leave campus and return home. "No, sweetheart," I told her firmly. "Stay focused on your studies. I've got this handled." I prayed she couldn't hear how badly my hands were shaking. The second call was the one I dreaded most. To my mother. The moment I explained what happened, her voice sharpened. "I'll be there first thing. Someone has to take care of him." I tried to protest, but it was like shouting into a storm. She was already in motion. At exactly 7 the next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it, still in my robe, hair damp from a half-finished shower. And there she stood, Margaret Hayes. Upright, imposing, a suitcase in one hand and a garment bag in the other, like she was checking in for a long campaign. "I caught the earliest Greyhound," she said without even greeting me. "He needs me." Before I could respond, she swept past me into the house, her perfume trailing like a warning flare. She set her bags down near the closet and immediately began scanning the living room, lips pressed thin as though cataloging all the ways I had failed since her last visit. "I'll take the guest room. Or perhaps the couch, since you never thought to set aside a proper space," she declared. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. "Can I make you some coffee?" I offered. "No need," she clipped back. "I brought my own. Yours is always too weak." I forced a brittle smile, nodding as though any of this was normal. By mid-morning, I had already phoned in for several days' leave from the infirmary. My commander was understanding, thank God. What I didn't admit was that my leave wasn't just about caring for my father. It was also about managing my mother, who never believed in silence, compromise, or boundaries. At the hospital, Margaret shifted into a different mode altogether. She entered my father's room like a field commander taking command of her unit, straightening blankets, adjusting pillows, chastising nurses for not answering call buttons quickly enough. Within the hour, she had memorized every nurse's name on the floor, barking them like orders during rounds. "This mattress is unacceptable," she snapped. "He's recovering from spinal trauma, not a sprained ankle." I tried to intervene, to soften her edges, but it was like chasing a storm with a broom. Every time I spoke, she countered me, louder, sharper, rephrasing my words as if they were her own. My father lay there silently, his eyes flicking between us like a spectator trapped in a match he never wanted to watch. He never spoke up. Maybe he didn't have the strength. Or maybe he refused to choose sides. But my mother had already chosen hers. And it wasn't mine. Watching her dictate to the staff and reposition my father's pillow for the third time in 5 minutes, I felt that familiar tension coil in my chest. The one I had learned to bury under forced smiles and swallowed comebacks. It wasn't new. Not really. From the moment my father first introduced me to her, I knew I didn't fit the mold she wanted. I'd worn my best dress, brought a carefully chosen bottle of wine, even baked a pie from scratch, because he'd said his mother loved homemade things. She didn't even glance at it. Instead, she gave me a long look and said, "So you're the one. Small town girl with big ambitions." That's it. I had laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. Margaret never hid her disapproval. Every dinner, every visit, she found new ways to remind me that I would never measure up. Her tone carried the weight of a scalpel. Precise, cutting, always leaving marks you couldn't quite see but always felt. But the memory that still burns me happened long before the accident. Back when my father was still deciding the course of his life. It was the night before he proposed to my mother. I couldn't sleep and went to get a glass of water. As I passed the darkened kitchen, their voices carried through the silence. "She's not the right one," Margaret hissed. "She's beneath you. Not from our circles, not educated the way she should be. No influence, no standing. You could do far better." "She's kind," my father replied, his voice steady. "She cares for me." "She's convenient," she shot back. "That's not the same thing." I froze in the hallway, glass trembling in my hand, my chest splitting open at every word. I should have turned away then, let the truth drive me out, but I didn't. Because a week later he knelt in their cramped apartment, ring in hand, and asked her to be his wife. And she said yes, clinging to the hope that love alone could be enough. Their wedding was small but beautiful. Friends, fellow officers, a few neighbors. Margaret came, of course, dressed in somber gray as though attending a funeral. She sat stiff as stone through the vows, never smiled for the photographs. Then came the toast. She raised her glass, her voice calm but cutting. "To Evelyn, you've caught yourself a remarkable man. He is loyal, disciplined, and more generous than most. And to Robert, my son, well, I always dreamed you'd choose someone extraordinary. But life does love its surprises." The room laughed uneasily. My mother swallowed the humiliation, smiling through the sting, because what else could she do? Years blurred together. After the accident, I ran back and forth between hospital and home, managing the cooking, the laundry, the bills, and long calls from work, all while pretending to my daughter that everything was steady so she wouldn't panic. Margaret lingered at the house like royalty awaiting reports, criticizing every doctor's decision, pacing the floors like she commanded the place. My father mostly slept, dulled by pain medication, retreating into silence. He'd squeeze my hand now and then, but even that felt heavy, as if he were slipping farther away. One morning Dr. Lee pulled me aside. His voice was measured but firm. "We've done everything possible surgically. What matters now is rehabilitation. Movement, stimulation. I'd like to recommend someone. Arthur Blake. He's a private therapist. In cases like your father's, he's achieved remarkable results." He handed me a card. I turned it over in my palm, already knowing what the answer to my next question would cost me. "How expensive is he?" The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. "He isn't cheap. But if it were my family, I wouldn't hesitate." That evening, over what barely counted as dinner, lukewarm soup and silence, I broached the subject. "I think we should hire Arthur. Dr. Lee said he's the best chance we have." Margaret scoffed instantly. "We don't need to waste money on some outsider poking at him for a fortune an hour. I used to coach gymnastics, remember? I know how to train the body. I can help him." "With respect," I said carefully, holding my ground, "this isn't a strained muscle or a posture issue. This is a spinal cord injury." Her eyes flashed. "I gave birth to him. I know what his body needs." My father said nothing. He only stared down at his untouched bowl, the silence pressing in on all of us. So I made the call myself. I reached out to Arthur Blake, booked the first available session, and signed us up. It meant draining the savings account. our little security cushion, the emergency fund my father and I had worked so hard to protect. But if it gave him even a chance to stand again, I would spend every last dollar. Arthur began coming 3 times a week. He was steady, patient, and exacting. He brought his own equipment, detailed charts, and a quiet persistence that pushed without breaking. He challenged my father, but with encouragement, not cruelty. And through it all, Margaret stood in the corner, arms folded, muttering under her breath. Pointless. Waste of money. I told you so. Her disapproval filled the room like smoke. 2 months went by. My father still couldn't walk. I was running on fumes, juggling therapy appointments, paperwork, bills, and my shifts at the infirmary. I lost weight without trying. My eyes burned from exhaustion. My back ached every time I bent to lace my boots. And still it felt like I was failing. Meanwhile, Margaret had become a permanent fixture at the house, hovering over every task, picking at every detail. The towels aren't folded properly. The rice is overcooked. You were too sharp with the nurse. Each comment was a sting, small but relentless. And my father, he hardly spoke. He stopped asking about Claire. He stopped asking about me. Sometimes I stayed late at work just to buy myself a few minutes of silence before returning home. Then one afternoon, while changing his sheets, I noticed something sticking out from under the bed frame. I reached down and pulled out a glass bottle, half-drained whiskey. My heart seized. My father never touched whiskey. At least he hadn't before. My hands shook as I carried it into the living room. What's this? He didn't even look startled. Just tired. It helps with the pain. There's medication for that, I said. Monitored. Safe. It's not enough. I swallowed hard. You're sneaking liquor. Hiding it from me. That's not about pain, Dad. He turned away. And for the first time I forced myself to say the words I'd been choking on for weeks. If you keep going like this, I can't do it anymore. I won't stand here and watch you destroy yourself. I love you, but I won't drown with you. If nothing changes, maybe we need space. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Margaret's voice slashed through the air. So this is it? You're abandoning him? Walking out now when he needs you most? What kind of daughter does that? I turned to her slowly, fury and heartbreak tangled in my chest. The kind who's been holding everything together while he gave up, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I couldn't tell if I was angry or just broken. A few days later, Dr. Lee pulled me aside again. His eyes carried that careful weight, the look of someone who knows what they're about to say will crush you. Your father has made progress, he began. But to truly regain function, he may need spinal stabilization surgery. It's risky, not guaranteed. Without it, though, the chances of him walking again are slim. My stomach twisted. Will insurance cover it? He hesitated. Not fully. The specialists, the aftercare, inpatient rehab. It adds up fast. I just wanted you to be prepared. He handed me a folder thick with estimates and referrals. I smiled weakly, thanked him, and then walked straight to the stairwell where no one could see me. There I broke apart. I wept until my chest ached, knowing what the numbers in that folder meant. We didn't have that kind of money. Not even close. Not anymore. That night, after my father had finally drifted into medicated sleep and Margaret locked herself away in the guest room with her tablet blaring old reruns, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I listed every expense, every bill, the scraps of savings left in the account. The math refused to work. So I did the only thing I could. I started searching for a second job. Nothing glamorous, just something small, evening shifts, maybe weekends. Cleaning, stocking, anything that paid quickly. I didn't care if it left me exhausted. If it meant giving my father another chance, I would do it. The next afternoon, during my lunch break at the infirmary, a woman hurried in asking for over-the-counter pain relief. As I handed her the bottle, our eyes met and I froze. Anna? She asked, lowering her sunglasses. Took me a moment, but then recognition hit. Behind the tailored jacket and sleek blonde hair was Ines Harper, the quiet girl from my high school who used to sit in the back with freckles and braces. Now she looked like she ran the city. Oh my God, it really is you, she said. You're still here. We talked briefly before my break ended. I gave her a careful version of what had happened with my father. Her expression softened. Then she surprised me. I manage a boutique hotel downtown. We've been struggling to keep staff. It's cleaning work, long hours sometimes, but it pays decently and schedules are flexible. Interested? I didn't even let her finish. Yes. I'll take it. The next evening I slipped sneakers into my bag, changed after my shift and headed straight to the hotel. I didn't tell my father and I definitely didn't tell Margaret. This was mine to carry. By the 10th day without rest my body was screaming. I clocked out of the infirmary at 1600, grabbed a granola bar, changed in the staff bathroom and started my second shift. My feet ached, my lower back throbbed and I still had 6 rooms left on my checklist. Ines texted me 3rd floor tonight. Rooms 307 through 312. The 3rd floor was always the worst. Business travelers in luxury rooms, leaving twice the mess. But I kept my head down. I needed the hours. Room 310 was near the end of the hall. I knocked twice, waited, then slid the keycard. Housekeeping, I called softly. No reply. I stepped inside, dragging the cart behind me, ready to strip the bed, empty the trash, check the minibar, until I froze. Standing near the window, balanced perfectly on his own 2 feet, was my father. No chair. No brace. No trembling hands. Just standing, moving with ease. And he wasn't alone. A young woman, blonde, mid-20s tall, dressed in a silk robe, had her arms draped casually over his shoulders. He was laughing carefree. He was smiling back at her, closer than any innocent moment should allow. They didn't see me right away. I gripped the cart so hard my knuckles went white, certain for a second that I was hallucinating. But then he turned. His smile vanished. Anna. Hearing my name in his voice snapped me back. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just spun around and walked fast out of the room, my chest tightening with each step. I refused to let him see me cry. The elevator was too slow, so I bolted down the stairwell, through the lobby and out into the cold night air. My breath caught, the wind slicing like knives, and I thought, so this is what the worst night of my life feels like. I didn't make it far. A block away I heard his voice calling after me. His footsteps closing in fast. Anna, wait. Please, wait. I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear the kind of lie he'd spin this time. He jogged up, not limping, not braced, not broken, just a man who had been pretending all along. Please, he said again, panting. It's not what you think. I turned, my voice sharp. Really? Because it looked a lot like you walking just fine in a hotel room with another woman wrapped around you. He raised both hands like a man surrendering in a standoff. Okay, I know how it looked, but it wasn't, God, it wasn't about her. I laughed, short and bitter, the sound hollow in the night air. She's not what you think, my father blurted, stepping closer. His voice dropped, ragged. No, I mean, yes, she's there, but not in that way. I had to know. I had to see if you'd still stay. If you'd still love me when I couldn't walk. My chest went cold. You let me believe you were broken, I whispered. You let me work myself raw, scrape our savings, beg strangers for hours, just so you could test me? He flinched, like the words struck deeper than a fist. Arthur's therapy worked sooner than we thought. I was back on my feet weeks ago, but I wasn't ready to tell you. If I told you too soon, I was afraid you'd leave anyway. I shook my head, my mouth dry. And the girl. His gaze dropped. Alyssa. My old commander's daughter. I was trying to get reinstated to prove I could still contribute. She said if I let her talk to her father, he'd consider it. That's all. That's all. I laughed bitterly. She was wrapped around you like you belonged to her. He muttered. She said it's the only way her father listens. I didn't do anything. You didn't need to, I cut in, my voice raw. You already destroyed what mattered. The pain wasn't about the woman. It was the betrayal. The manipulation. The fact that while I was scrubbing floors at midnight to fund a surgery he no longer needed, he was standing, smiling, lying to me. By the time I reached home, my whole body shook with words I hadn't unleashed. Rage about humiliation, about how small he'd made me feel, about the trust he'd treated like a game. I opened the door ready to scream. But the phone rang before I could even set my bag down. Nat. I answered instantly. My daughter's voice came through, trembling. Mom. I didn't know who else to call. Her breathing hitched, uneven. My heart clenched. What is it? What's wrong? I'm pregnant, she whispered, the words breaking her. And I don't want to be. I sank onto the couch, anger draining out of me like water through my hands. Oh, sweetheart. I murmured. I don't know what to do, she rushed out. Max is terrified. I'm terrified. We're both still in school. This is the worst timing. I've ruined everything. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tight to my ear. You didn't ruin anything, I said gently. You just need to breathe. We'll figure it out. Together. Her voice cracked again. I've been thinking about ending it. I know that's... It's not awful, I interrupted softly. It's honest. But don't make that choice alone. Let's talk face to face. Can I come tomorrow? Silence. Then a shaky, really? Yes. Tomorrow. And Nat, if you choose to keep the baby, I'll help you. You won't face this alone. She cried harder, but this time it was relief. And in that moment something shifted inside me. I realized I had been pouring myself into saving a man who didn't want saving, all while forgetting the one person who truly needed me, who trusted me, who still believed I was enough. That night, after the house fell quiet, I packed a single suitcase. I left a note on the kitchen table, short, unflinching, final. I told my father I was filing for divorce. That I didn't hate him, but I no longer knew the man he'd become. And that I refused to keep living in a house built on lies. I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I packed up what was left of my life and moved to a quieter city, not far from Claire's campus. Close enough to be there when she needed me, but far enough to give her the space to breathe. With the scraps from the settlement, what little remained after lawyers and medical bills, I bought a modest 2-bedroom in a weathered brick building. The pipes rattled every time I ran hot water and the walls were paper thin, but the balcony caught the sunrise, and the air inside smelled like paint and the promise of a clean slate. Claire stayed with me through the final stretch of her pregnancy. We cooked together, folded tiny clothes, shared fears, and whispered hopes in the late hours. Some nights we cried. Others we laughed until our ribs hurt. And piece by piece, something inside us both began stitching itself back together. When the baby came, it was on a gray afternoon in March. I held her hand through every contraction, whispered strength into her ear when she thought she couldn't go on, and when the doctor finally placed that fragile, wriggling boy on her chest, my heart nearly burst with love I hadn't known I could still feel. She named him Elijah. 2 days later I brought them both home. That first morning back, I stood by the window with Elijah nestled in my arms, his warmth pressed against me, impossibly small and impossibly perfect. Outside, the rain had finally passed. Light poured through the curtains, washing the room in gold. Claire slept peacefully in the next room, her face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at my father for what he'd done. Not at Margaret for all the ways she cut me down. The grief had burned itself out. What remained was something quieter, steadier. I wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. I was anchored by what I'd found, by the family still here, still fighting, still choosing love. I looked down at my grandson, and without meaning to, words I hadn't thought of in decades slipped to the surface. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147 verse 3. I whispered it softly over Elijah, my voice catching in the morning light. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I smiled, and I truly meant it.